Hey everyone, and welcome to the Real Life Show. This is episode 2. We had a great time last time with Matt and Kay, but this week we're back with some new guests, Sarah. It is Pete and Rachel Wright, leaders of Springs Church. Hey. Welcome guys,
Welcome.
It's great to have you with us.
You're welcoming.
Yes.
Are you good?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you.
Happy to be here.
It is
Yeah,
good to have
happy
you.
to be here. Got a cup of tea
Nice.
here in these very trendy mugs here at the backyard.
At the backyard cafe, we're back again. We're backyard.
Thank you so much.
Is it your backyard?
It's not. It's really close to our backyard.
It is.
It really is at Arise. It
it's not.
basically could be if we had a large backyard. This would be
it.
our backyard.
Who doesn't want a coffee shop in
It's
your
almost like
backyard?
being in a Rise church.
It is all the wood.
No,
It
it's
is
not.
all the
Have we
wood.
still got? Oh gosh,
We've got wood.
You've got a lot.
Yeah, it's still there.
Are we?
Yeah.
Not time for a renovation yet.
Not yet.
We got a new cross though.
We've got a new cross.
Oh.
A new cross.
Time
We've got
for
a new
Easter.
cross.
Not an old rugged cross.
No, just a new cross. It's black piping backlit.
Disapproval.
It's being called the Las Vegas cross.
Is it?
Yes.
Who's calling it that?
Somebody called it. I like it. That's what I
Las
want to call
Vegas
it.
called
Go
them
with
what
it
makes
now.
Las Vegas.
It's not cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, we've got a cross. But yeah.
Trying to work out what a Las Vegas cross is.
Just think like bright lights.
I think like
and-
blue, like Elvis.
It is blue. It was blue.
It was blue, but we can have any colour.
It's a real gamble if it works or not.
Yeah.
Hey!
Oh, 'cause Las
Come on,
Vegas.
guys.
Come on, jokes. So moving on.
Moving on.
Pete, Rach.
Hello.
How did you feel when we asked you to be on the Real Life Show?
Take it away, Rachel.
Well, obviously it's a pleasure to come and sit with you, pair, and be with friends, quite genuinely. So that's very lovely, and it's easy to sit and talk to friends, right? So it felt like a privilege, but also something really quite enjoyable. So yeah.
Yeah, love it. Love Arise Church. Love you guys very, very much. Known you for a very long time. And yeah, love your church. And so, yeah, of course, why wouldn't we? This is real life, though, not reality TV, isn't
No.
it?
It's
true.
Okay.
We're going to get real.
Gonna get
real
real.
really soon. So you are from Springs Church in Gornal.
Yes,
Whoop,
we
whoop.
We love
Tell us
Springs.
what's going on with Springs at the moment. Anything that's happening in the life of
It's first.
Springs. You just told us not long ago about you doing an offering this Sunday.
We are doing an offering this
Tell us all
Sunday.
about it.
So a very fresh new project that we're doing in our community work is the Springs Church Community Grocery Store, which is
that's
wonderful.
amazing.
Yeah, so it's an amazing project being set up by our community leads, Maggie Harris and Emma Seeley. They're amazing. So this Palm Sunday is a triumphant day in the church calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we've challenged our church to raise a 1-ton food offering.
No
get-
marshmallows.
No marshmallows because they're very light.
Too light.
It doesn't really help with the whole tonnage
What about
thing.
crisps?
I mean,
Quite like
Yeah,
it,
like-
especially
only the
quavers.
twice cooked speciality crisps.
Kettle.
Yeah.
Kettle.
Yeah.
Dense.
Can you?
Yes.
I'm not
A
very
dense
good
crisp.
with like weight and like dimensions. So 1 ton.
It's a lot.
What is that?
How many?
Like,
Is it 1,000 kilograms?
like I need
Or
some
100
kind
kilograms.
of
What do you
like-
know?
Let's
What
go
do you
for
know?
Will I
like-
fill the table?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going for
Yeah.
like a
Like
van.
how heavy's a ton?
A lot.
It's
Three people.
like a mini car.
No.
Yeah, the old minis were
Oh,
about
that's
a
a
ton,
lot.
I
It's
think.
a lot, yeah.
I'm not very good at
I didn't know what you were after then. I didn't know whether you have to
I need
like.
some kind of like
It's-
that,
so
like,
Mini Cooper car, that helps.
full of food.
We think.
Yeah. So we're gonna go for a 1-ton food offering to kickstart the provision of the community grocery store, which is starting soon. So Springs in general is good. I like the question, not how big is your church. I prefer the question, how healthy is your church?
Yeah.
And I think the church is in a pretty healthy place. It's in a really exciting place, actually. Different aspects of church life are always at different points, aren't they?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of new things starting. There's a lot of things that have been going for a while that seem to be growing really well. But there's always more we can do. And so when it comes to the health of our church, not just how far is our reach into the community, but how healthy is the family of God that already exists together. Because if that family's not healthy, we've got nothing worthwhile inviting the community into. So things are very exciting at the moment. There's a lot going on. The youth work kind of exploded since last September, which is amazing. Our youth leaders are doing an amazing job. Sundays are exciting. We had our own little EP out in summer last year, so that was exciting. And so there's kind of new songs being used in church that have been written in-house. And So there's lots of
Alpha.
yeah. So there's an alpha course happening at the moment.
Nice.
Back in the pub.
Moo.
Is
And,
it? Oh,
yeah.
that's really cool.
And,
That is.
that's really exciting. Yeah. Things are good. Things are
Great.
good. Yeah.
That's cool. How old Springs now?
8 years on April the
Whoa.
15th.
That's
How
great.
many?
8 years on April the 15th.
Coming up.
Yeah.
Birthday's coming. Any
Oh,
celebrations?
Birthday
Crazy.
party.
Oh, 19th of April, sorry, not 15th. No, actually, we haven't. We should probably think about that.
Because there's
Easter.
Easter as well,
Just-
like the run up to Easter.
Yeah.
We might do a
Um,
cake.
Yeah,
We were going to
candles,
celebrate the
candles.
death and resurrection of Jesus around our birthday time because it's not about us, is it?
Yeah.
Not about
So,
us.
yeah.
That's
Um,
cool.
So obviously we've brought you on here because we want to go through the theme of church planting. But I just want to ask you, Rach, can you just introduce what you do, because you have a job outside of church as well?
And do have a
So
job outside
Can
of
you just
church.
share a little bit of a snapshot of your job?
My job, so I am assistant principal in a school in Solihull, in Chelmsley Wood, and I love my job. I have a fantastic job, predominantly on the pastoral side of school life, so working with 11 to 18-year-olds, in lots of different ways, so focusing on behaviour, attendance, safeguarding, personal development, and a whole bag of things, but it's a real privilege, and
Yeah.
You love it, don't you?
yeah, I love it. It's very busy. Put it politely.
Challenging.
Busy, challenging, and rewarding, all
Ah.
wrapped
All
into
wrapped in
one
one.
wonderful
That's so
package.
good. That's amazing. Thanks, guys.
So, Rachel, that's your job. So, Pete, what do you? So, obviously, because of Sarah's question, I'm thinking you probably work at Springs.
Yes,
So, what do you do in Springs?
I do. So
He also has half a day contract in a
I
school.
was I was a full-time history teacher and then RE teacher for a long time, and then came out of that in 2017. I'm an extremely part-time teacher now. I'm officially half a day a week.
Wow.
But around exam time, right, teachers? Oh, yeah, it's a little more than that. But no, I work for Springs in the vast majority of my week. Yeah, so a little bit varied.
What's your standard quick week at Springs? Working there.
It's really hard to quantify. Mondays and Tuesdays our community cafe is open,
Yeah.
and the building is very busy on Mondays and Tuesdays particularly. So if I'm not in the office, I'll be mingling with kind of the guys and girls coming in and seeing what's going on. Mondays and Tuesdays are kind of big meeting days and kind of getting around people, lots of admin. Some of you know Jen Wade, who works with us, and she's amazing. And so getting our heads together, making sure the calendar's right, and making sure things are prepared. And so, yeah, it's very varied. Wednesdays and Fridays are kind of a little more relaxed in terms of the amount of people I might see on those days. So if I'm preaching that week, then my Wednesdays and Fridays will be given to study, preparing for the Sunday, or if I'm not preaching that week, using it for pastoral catch-ups, and but also trying to get into a much better habit of prayer for the church, because you can get wrapped up in a lot of doing things instead of going to God and asking the boss what he wants. So trying to practice that more.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like we're fully caught up.
Fully cool.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Should we get into it?
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely.
So, the best place to start, I think, is find out how you came to know Jesus. So, individually, what was the start of your journey with Jesus like?
Do you want to go first?
No, you can.
I guess whenever I'm asked this question, I always want to involve my parents first, because they're amazing. My mum and dad became Christians from non-Christian households when they were teenagers.
Okay.
And so they ended up meeting down in Gornal at various church events, became an item, and then became a married couple, and then became parents to myself, my brother, and my sister. And so we were brought up in a Christian household, one that was on fire for God, one that was uncompromising in their Christian faith. Uncompromising doesn't mean fundamentalist, awkward, cold Christians, but kind of on fire for their faith in that they love people very well, serve their guts out in the local church, disciple people, open their home loads. And so that was the environment I grew up in, a very faithful Christian household. And then Yeah, so I grew up knowing of Jesus. I can't remember a time where I've not loved the Lord, because that was the environment I was brought up in. However, there was a specific point in my life when I was 16, coming 17, where I just split up with a girl. And I was feeling a little bit lost at sea, and oh gosh, it was devastating.
Lost at sea.
And my heart was being wrenched out of my chest from puppy love
me.
heartbreak. It wasn't me. And I remember this moment at youth camp. I just had my GCSE results, and I'd done pretty well, I'm not going to lie. But I remember sitting on this bench in the dark, looking out over a field, and just like, Lord, like, this hurts, this is rubbish, and I'm fed up, and I've been here at youth camp, and I'm like, man, if you're real, Lord, like, I want to follow you because me and you have got a relationship, not just because I've been brought up or fashioned in a certain Christian way. And so it was kind of like the age of 16, 17, I would say, that I really started to purposely follow Jesus and pursue Jesus for myself, as opposed to attend church and just be part of a great Christian family. You know, so it was that. And I would say that my personal faith really took off. Is that even a phrase, really? When I was filled with the Holy Spirit, kind of around that time as well. And so the life of God became very real to me in a way that perhaps I hadn't previously. And so that's me, really. Yeah. Blessed to have grown up in the household I did. Yeah. But then a point of decision on my own terms with God, Lord, I need you and I want to follow you. Kind of 16, 17. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful, Pete. And just to let everybody know, Pete's dad, Pastor Tony, is our assistant pastor at Arise Church, and we absolutely adore him. We adore him, don't we? And so many of us do. He's wonderful. Sorry, over to you, Rach.
That's all right. Yeah. So my story has some similarities to Pete's, but it's not exactly the same. So the household I grew up in, Mum went to church from when I was born, because I was premature and I could have been really quite poorly, and Mum wanted to thank God for wanted to thank someone for me being alive and well. Wow. And the only person she could think of thanking at the time was God, so she found her way to church. So Mum kind of lived her life by thanking God for quite a long time, although my dad wasn't a Christian. So I had the choice right up to leaving home, really, about whether I wanted to go to church or not. I was never kind of brought up in that environment that Pete had, that kind of, although Mum went to church, it was very much my decision what I did and didn't do. So if I wanted to watch Dawson's Creek, which is a massive memory of mine as a teenager, I'd sit and watch Dawson's Creek on a Sunday morning and be well happy with that. Or I could go and watch my brother play rugby, because that was something else that happened in our household.
And his rugby mates.
And his rugby mates, although they're a bit young. Just, that seems more like, not sure. I feel like you added there, babe. Don't remember that, but you know.
You had a lot. If you were ever going to come to church, there was a lot to come through, wasn't there?
Well, I mean, I had options. Let's be honest.
I didn't.
You didn't. I did.
Oh, you had heartbreak.
Pete had heartbreak. I had options. I mean, that says it all, doesn't it? Really. Yeah. Wow. I feel like we just had a revelation there. Right. Pete got over his heartbreak. I found my option. That's nice. So, gosh, I'm sorry, people. So growing up, I had kind of a choice what I wanted to do, and for a long time I explored all those choices and thoroughly enjoyed myself exploring them a lot of the time, if I'm honest. I don't know, and I suppose I kind of didn't have a relationship with God. It kind of didn't really matter too much. It was like if I went to church with my mum and nan, brill. If I didn't, not a problem. It wasn't really a massive issue either way. So I suppose faith was more of like an option for me as a child. It's something I could pick and choose. And then the similarity with Pete comes at this point. So Pete's a little bit older than me, but around the same sort of time, I was 17. when I was 17, I had this option to go and do a mission, which was an incredible opportunity. And during this mission, kind of had this moment of God's not an option. You either choose God or you don't, and you can't live. There's a scripture in the Bible that talks about you can't be lukewarm. You have to choose. You have to be one thing or another.
Yeah.
And at that point, I said to God, right, I see. And if anyone knows me, once I make a decision, I've made a decision. It's kind of like I'm not a kind of person that flits around a bit. So I kind of made this decision. I was like, all right, God, let's do this. And God was very gracious to me at that time, because I would have said I was a sheep. So if I was in a school environment, I had wonderful friends at school, a great set of friends, but I just did what the crowd did, and if it was an option, I gave it a go. Let's try that out. Let's find out what that's like. And God knew that I needed someone to show me the way through, and God was really kind to me, and Pete and I got together. I know, look at him.
When a hero comes
I mean, he was my option. I chose. No, but
cast your fears aside.
Wow.
so.
New lyrics there.
I mean,
Nice, isn't it?
Works.
I feel like this was my story, and they've just ruined it.
It is, it's just got a soundtrack.
No, so we had. Yeah, God was really good to me. He gave me Pete to kind of figure this journey out with a little bit and hold my hand quite literally. So we became a couple, and that was that really. And we've been a couple ever since, haven't we? I mean, since I was 17. But on that time, I kind of got to know God in a real sense. Got to know who He was for me, how He impacted my life, and. Went on a bit of a journey to this point.
Wow, that's amazing, right? So you say God brought you Pete. So how on earth did you meet?
On earth.
On earth.
Well, I mean, we met quite a while ago, but I don't remember that bit.
Oh.
So
We first met when
he wasn't an option then. Sorry, guys.
A little bit.
No, it's true. It's true.
It is true.
We first
Got a bit
met.
warm now, people. Hang on.
We first met when I was 16 and Rach was 14.
Yeah.
And
Just a child.
just friends, really, but never kind of like any romantic involvement or romantic thoughts there. And then we had grown up in an environment where a lot of the local churches we're connecting to something called the Net, which is now known as Love Black Country. A festival coming this summer, get your tickets. And around that time, someone really influential in our lives, who to this day still is, called Lindsay Walsmith. She, as a very new Christian at 16, 17 years old, started this thing called Bridge Builders, which was getting loads of young people from different churches to meet and get to know each other. And so it fostered an environment of togetherness amongst a whole raft of young people from across the area, from different churches. And so we were kind of in and out of each other's kind of company, weren't we? And then our two church youth groups became great friends, didn't they? So after church on a Sunday night, loads of us would get into all the cars of all the 17, 18-year-old lads that could drive, and we'd belt it over to Walsall and go and hang out with the Junction 10 youth, which is where Rach went to church. And so then we do mission together. A mission called Revolution, which very much came out of Bridge Builders.
Yeah, which I would then say I actually realised Pete lived and existed.
Yeah,
at
you
that
noticed
point.
me.
Yeah.
You noticed me.
That's when I had this light bulb moment.
Yeah, and so I'm just a few years older than Rachel, and
Just a few.
yeah, and I was her small group leader on this particular mission, and kept everything very appropriate, you know, and kind of like, yes, Rachel, yes, let's go and do this mission this week, and all that kind of stuff. But we had a great time serving together, and I found her absolutely hilarious. And oh gosh, I'm falling in love with you thinking about it. And we had an amazing time together. And at the end of the mission, kind of a few days after it had come to an end, I text Rach on my Sagem Vodafone.
You did.
And I said, and I was kind of like, hey, I've really enjoyed getting to know you this weekend, and like, would you like to go maybe on a date sometime? Words to those effect. Rach called me straight away
Oh,
because
wow.
me and
Yeah,
my
I-
sister.
No, well, I just thought
yeah.
he was messing around, didn't I?
Yeah.
Oh,
Me and my sister
right.
Kerry had quite a reputation for prank calls.
Yeah.
And,
So I wasn't
she
going to be
thought-
lulled into that
Oh, you
like
thought
thing.
you were
I was
getting
just
pranked.
like, yeah, I did.
And anyway, it
I'm
turns
alright with
out.
that though, to be honest. Like, you know.
And so we went on a date one Friday afternoon.
Oh,
did.
where was it? What was it?
First
So-
of all, I picked you up
Well, yeah.
from
I
your
mean-
house.
We had squash.
We had some awkward squash in your mum and dad's kitchen.
We did.
Didn't quite know what to say.
You went in? And you went in?
So yeah.
Oh, Pete.
So do you want to come in a sec? So, yeah, okay. So then, and then we got in my daddy's Escort that I borrowed, and we drove to Birmingham.
We did.
Wow.
We went to the Sea Life Centre.
Wow, that's a
this is
great
a
date.
great
That's a
first
great
date.
date.
Yes, it is. We then went to Pizza Hut.
No, we
Nice.
didn't. We went to
Oh.
see the film first, didn't we?
Maybe we did.
Film
And I
as
talked all the way
well.
through it.
Yeah, it was
It was
Johnny
boring.
English 1.
Oh, good film.
And still got the cinema tickets in your scrapbook, haven't you, babe?
Oh.
Rachel held my hand. She was really keen, like embarrassingly keen. Like, it was like, slow down a bit, flipping it. You'll be married this time next
Whoa.
week at this rate. So
Batted it away.
just get off. No, I held on. It was butterflies, and yeah, yeah.
We went to pizza. I paid. He
Yeah,
didn't like that.
I
He
went
got
to the
cross with me.
toilet, came back, and she'd paid.
Wow.
For
This Pizza Hut.
for Pizza Hut, yeah.
Independent woman.
That was embarrassing. I was like, oh
It's
gosh,
not
no.
embarrassing, that's good.
No, it was 2006. It was still the man's job. No, it wasn't.
No,
2003.
well, we got. I was going to say, what
2003.
happened to the youth?
Yeah. So yeah, that's
Wow, it's a great story, that is.
That's
it in
a
a
really
nutshell.
big, that's a big commitment for a first date. Like Sea Life Centre,
Yeah.
the cinema,
Yeah.
and then
Pizza.
food.
yeah.
I mean, we were both.
And then
It was
we
the
got
first
back to
date.
serving our individual youth
Oh, yeah.
groups that same night.
Oh,
How about that?
The commitment was
Love
greater
it.
than that. Like,
Love it.
so I knew that Pete loved
Yeah.
Avril Lavigne.
Oh yeah, this is hilarious.
So
Did you?
obviously I was a little bit manipulative and I wanted to date. So what I decided to do, this was back when you got CDs and you could, like, I don't know how you do it,
Copy
but
your
you
CDs.
yeah, record it on a CD. I got my friend Alex Lee to download the Avril Lavigne CD
Let
thingy
go.
Oh.
That album.
on the disc,
Yeah.
and I had a Walkman disc thing,
Nice.
and I was late from sixth form on the bus on purpose so that I knew he'd have to drive past me while I was listening to Avril Lavigne. So when he got in the car, he's like, "What, you listening to Avril Lavigne? Oh, we've got something in common."
Such a connection.
I think that's called manipulation.
I think it's
people.
called getting played. But it
I
worked.
think she's scared.
Wow,
I don't know who-
right, you were quite like
You were keen.
invested in this.
Yeah. I mean, we don't. Like I said, I don't do
Well,
anything by halves.
I'm gonna.
That's true.
No, I'm not gonna.
No,
say
don't
that.
go down that route.
No.
This year, I know where you're going with. This is still on.
Can it
Yeah, I
be?
know.
Oh yeah, no, okay.
Come on, you've got to share
No,
that.
we can't. No, it's not
No, I
good.
can't say it's
If Rose says it's not good, it's not
Tell us after.
No, I think Sarah might already know. But like,
No, I don't.
Oh, this is awkward. Basically, right?
no, shush.
Yeah, come on.
Say it,
no,
we can
it's
cut it.
bad.
Say it, we can cut it. Real. Anyway, so let's move on. It's a great story, by the way.
Yeah,
I
thanks
do
so
love that
much.
story. It was a
Yeah,
great
no, it's a
story.
great story.
It was a great story. Some people watching will obviously know exactly who you are.
Yeah.
You are Pete and Rachel Wright. You came to church with us years and years ago, and we loved that. Some people watching will not have a clue
Nope.
who you are, and these guys came. They were part of Calvary, not Arise. It wasn't Arise.
No.
Was it not Arise? You were part of.
No.
No, Arise afterwards. But for many, many years, and then felt a call from God. We're going to find out in a little bit in a minute about it. But we want to push you on to the story about Springs and how that came about. We said it earlier that we want to talk about church planting and how that came about. So handing over to you a little bit now, and we'll come in with some questions. But Calvary to Springs, what started it? What pushed you over to it? And tell us a little bit about that crossover. That transition.
Those teenage years of kind of getting together in those early days were incredibly powerful. One was from kind of like a boyfriend-girlfriend kind of thing, but then secondly, and most importantly, from a calling from God, like on us as a couple, was incredible. So growing up, I'd been going to church in Kings Winford since the age of 7. I met Andy when I was 7, and Dave Trask when I was 7, and been my best mates since. And so from the age of 7, I've been going to church and in Kingsmithford at Calvary and loved it. And the older I get, the more and more I realise just how blessed we were to grow up under the leadership of Paul and Gail Chamberlain. And but in my heart, I always felt like a spiritual whim. That's the only way I could describe it. To be serving the Lord in the community that I grew up in and that I was a part of and all that kind of stuff. And so I always felt the call of God to serve him in Gornal. But could never really put legs on that, never really had clear vision or confirmation for that really. And so what I did do was I ploughed myself into the ministry at Calvary, whether that was youth work or the worship team in particular. Those were my two things. Or later on towards the end of my time there, the senior leadership team. But the call of God was really, really clarified in those first few months that we were dating. I shared with Rachel, I really feel like I should be in Gornal someday for God. And around that time, God spoke to you real clear.
Yeah, so like I said, I didn't really grow up experiencing God in kind of like that supernatural way. It wasn't really a thing that I delved into. It was more of like I said, an option. And so I kind of dipped in and out of church when I felt like it, when Dawson's Creek got boring. And I think, there was the Castaway and stuff as well. There was a lot to get your teeth into on E4 at that time. Anyway, but so I never really lived kind of like this spiritual experience of God until I got to that point where I was like, God, actually, I'm not going to be lukewarm. I'm not going to live this option life. I'm actually going to, this is my life. And so God really started to open up a world of actually he speaks, which was mind-blowing, really. And I didn't know Pizza, I didn't know Gornal, didn't know Kingsmithford, didn't know this area very well at all. I grew up in Warsaw, went to school in Aldridge, so Birmingham was kind of like my town. Like that area this area wasn't really known to me. And one day, I just had this, for want of a better term, vision, picture, idea, thought about a building. And in that building, there was a big cross at the front. It was a red brick building, and there was young people and a particular person walking from 5 ways in Gornal. If you know 5 ways, there was an island at the top with 5 roads coming off it. And these young people were walking down the road into what I thought was a church at the time. And I said to Pete, I think I just told him about it, not really thinking much about it, and just thinking, oh, this is interesting. I wonder what this means. And I shared it with Pete, and he said, right then, let's go for a drive. Let's see if we can find it. And
because this building you were describing to me, you knew it was in Gornal.
Yeah.
But I couldn't for the life of me think where you were talking about. So we literally said, it was at a conference you had this vision, wasn't it?
It was at Audacious conference,
and so we said, right, well, when we get home, we'll drive around and we'll see if we can see what God showed you. Wow. So we go for a drive around all the holy hotspots in Gornal.
There's a few of them.
There's quite a few red brick buildings, but not one of them with a cross outside until you get to this place called the Memorial Hall. And we're driving past the Memorial Hall, and Rach says, stop, that's it, that's what God showed me. Wow. And I was like, the Memorial Hall, nothing happens. I've been lived there my whole life, I've never been in the Memorial Hall. Yeah. But that was absolutely what you felt God had showed you. Wow. And so that kind of vision,
it birthed a spark. It kind of created a spark in me, and it solidified something in Pete. And then us together, a commonality and a journey that we went on together. So that was, I was 17 at the time, Pete was 19. And from that point, we went on a journey of holding, the Bible also talks about Mary when she heard, found out that she was going to be pregnant with Jesus, and she treasured these things in her heart, and that's something we did for a long time. So we spent a long time just. One of my pastor at the time, Pastor John Price from One Born Church, he said, just put it to one side and God won't let it go if it's. And we did. We served our hearts out at Arise Calvary. And loved our time there, never thought like this is a stepping stone onto something else or anything like that. We just treasured it in our heart, and it actually just grew and grew and grew without it kind of overtaking our focus of what we were doing in the now. So we served with everything we had and loved every moment of it, and was fully invested in what we were doing at Arise Calvary. And just kind of loved the people there, loved being on team with everyone, and it was an incredible time.
Just to rewind
Yeah.
to a few moments ago, so when we felt that God had spoken to you so clearly, and it confirmed what I'd always felt about serving him in that area, we went to see Pastor John Price, who has been a wonderful mentor and support over the years.
You broke his light switch.
And we go round his house. I did break his toilet light switch that night. I never got invited back to his house, John. But we shared the vision, or we shared this burgeoning calling that we had with him, and we were asked for his advice, really. And he said, you need to forget about it now.
Wow.
That was his advice.
Isn't it?
Forget about it now. Forget about it now. Don't you understand how God has spoken, and we need
were
to
teenagers
move.
at the time, so obviously we were like, let's take a risk.
How did you feel when he said that?
A little bit like, don't get it.
Yeah,
but his advice was, he literally said, put it on the shelf.
Nice.
And if it's God, without you forcing it, this call will come back again and again and again.
Wow.
And you won't have to force it. Just forget about it, put it on the shelf, and just see what God does. If it doesn't turn out to be what you think it is, at least you are seeking the will of God. Flipping brilliant.
Wow.
And so that was his advice. And so I was 19, Rachel was 17. So between the ages of 31 and 29, we served and we loved being part. So we were Josh's youth pastor for a short time, and we were there when Andy and Sarah first got together, and all the rest of it. And so yes, we loved that time. And it was our privilege to be youth pastors for 4 years. At Calvary, and we loved it. So when the time came, it wasn't like it was a sudden surprise to Paul and Gail and the leaders of the church. We'd got a great relationship with the leaders of the church, and I think because of the authenticity of our serving the house of God and serving their vision, there was an openness to discussing what we felt God was calling us to, and they were very nurturing. And they gave us lots of permission to seek the will of God for our lives. And
I think along the way as well, moments became like a treasure hunt almost. So there was little things, big things. There was moments along that journey when different people affirmed what we felt God had said, or we read scriptures that affirmed that where we were heading. So like there's people like our friend John, who kind of he had things that just
very
people
similar,
along the route that
lots
just,
of confirmation,
and they became like treasure hunts really, just like we'll add that to the treasure trove, we'll leave that, and it just created a bit of story so we could talk for hours about the treasures that led up to it. But
so many prophetic words that worked out,
absolutely,
and confirm where we were going.
That's wonderful. What a beautiful way to describe that as well, like a treasure hunt.
And
how obedient to not balk against that, forget about it now. Because that was precious, wasn't it? And oh wow, what incredible obedience. So when you came to leave, just explain, what did that look like? Did you get a team together? How did you pick the date? All of that stuff, the start of Springs. What did that look like?
Can you remind me of how did you pick the date in a second?
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So the way it started was we'd been open with our pastors.
Yeah.
They knew that we had a heart to do something for Jesus. We didn't really completely know it was to start a church. I think we did ultimately, but we kind of wanted to give it a chance. Maybe we're just to sow our lives into that community. Maybe it's not a church we've got to plant, but we have got to be there and see what the Lord does.
Right.
It turned out to be a church plant, which was a surprise, but not really a surprise to us. Because we've been open with Paul and Gail, we'd asked their permission. We never asked anyone to come with us. It has to be a calling, it has to be a calling. It can't be a cajoling. And so, but over the years, and people would ask us, so what do you think you're going to do in the future? Where's life kind of heading? And so we were very gently open about where we felt God was calling us. We were a little bit cagey because we didn't want to influence people. We had a position of influence in the church community, and it would have been easy to manipulate and steal a lot of people away to go and do some Pete and Rachel church. So we didn't ask anyone to come with us, but we did share lightly the vision with people if they asked us, and we were honest. And some people started to stick to that story, stick to that vision. And so what started to happen was, so Ben and Jen Wade, who many of you will know, they're 10 years younger than us, and they were in our youth, and this one night they asked if they could speak to us very seriously, and it was all a little bit, oh goodness me, when young people say, can we have a serious chat? Oh gosh, what am I going to have to tell their dad? But they told us that they'd been seeking God for their lives as young teenagers, 15, 16-year-olds, and God had spoken to them and said, wherever Pete and Rachel are, I want you to go with them.
Wow.
Which is like amazingly humbling. So we kind of like embraced that, but didn't control that, and just allowed their journey to be a treasure hunt. Like, we never used those terms with Ben and Jen, but I guess that's kind of what what's going on for both of us. So that Ben and Jen were the first, and then our great friend Lindsay Waldsmith. My brother and Esther, so my brother Samuel had been youth pastor at another church in Dudley, and they stepped down from being youth pastors because Sam had vision from a young age that him and I would serve God together. So Sam and Esther became part of this little group. And then the Lord kind of used lots of different situations to bring us together with another couple called Phil and Ruth Harris, who are just treasured in the history of our church now, actually. And we look back and we think, gosh, they were really important. And so Phil and Ruth Harris were part of that group that started to emerge. But then there was this beautiful couple called John and Carol Rowe, who had grown up and served their guts out for decades, I won't say how many, in the local Methodist church in Gornal, and they felt God was calling them to do something new in Gornal too. And God kind of just wove our kind of stories together. We ended up coming together and knowing of each other. Pastor Paul and Gail, I asked if we could have their permission to start meeting as a small group, so it meant that we wouldn't be part of a life group. But we would start meeting with these guys. And so we met and fasted together every Monday for about 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And we would eat together at night, and then we'd talk about church and dream about what it might look like. And,
Rachel Bullock jumped in on that journey
Rachel
at times
Bullock
as well.
she was part of that journey and helped those early conversations.
Absolutely.
I love how organic the group kind of formed together, and through that time, I remember, like, as my youth pastors, you could have sat me down and sold it to me, and I'd have come with you.
You're a Gornal lad, aren't you?
I am from that way, and I've spoken to Pete about this before on something else we did, but like Pete preached the last preach at Calvary.
Palm Sunday,
2015. And I remember the message, and I will be honest, I was going. I was like, this is amazing.
Oh, we could have had all these cameras and lights.
Editing skills.
I was going, and the preach, like Pete kind of did this call at the end for people to step forward and support Andy. And I've never felt until that moment a nudge like that in my life. And I felt a push to go forwards, and I was like, no, because I want to go to Springs. What was it called, Springs at that point? I was like, I want to go with Pete. But like, I remember that moment, and I think how organically you created that group is why it worked, probably. In a way,
it was very much a leading of the Holy Spirit thing,
definitely.
because there's no way that our worlds would have collided with Phil and Ruth, or with John and Carol, or with the others that ended up coming with us. But what happened was this: so that vision that Rach had of the Memorial Hall, we deliberately set about having a bunch of prayer meetings that we called the Love Gornal prayer meetings, and anyone that had a heart to see the Lord transform the community, come and pray with us. And there was that core team and a few others that came along to support. But amongst those few others are some of the absolute pillars of our church community today that we did not know until they started coming to those prayer meetings. And so it genuinely was birthed out of vision, calling, and fasting and prayer. And that is what happened. And when I say it in those terms, it sounds incredibly holy and biblical. We didn't realise we were following some kind of brilliant blueprint. It was just, okay, what should we do now? Oh, we think we should do this. Does it seem good to us and the Holy Spirit? Yeah, okay, come on then. And that was it. And so that's how it got started. Paul and Gail, I must say, the most releasing pastors, and we didn't know, but they'd had a vision of us leaving and planting something away from Calvary for a very long time, but had treasured it in their hearts. So they didn't pressure, they didn't influence, God did the work. And they then just said, oh, by the way, God told us this would happen.
Wow.
Yeah, and you were going to say about the date.
Yeah, the date.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about the date.
So we're meeting as a core team the one night, not that we call ourselves the core team at this point, just people planting a church.
We were just the people.
Yeah,
We were
just
the only people.
And we sat one night and we're praying and we're asking each other, when do you think we should start the church? And I was like, we should probably start it in January 2015. New year, new start, bada bing, bada boom. And then as we were praying together later, Lindsay Walsmith had a prophetic vision from the Lord. And it was of a young fawn, not a fully fledged stag, but a young fawn in a snowy landscape, thick snow on the ground. And it was a picture of us starting the church in January. And if we did in January, we were incredibly weak and small, and the temperature was wrong, and it was a vulnerable animal that was going to get devoured by the elements.
Wow.
But then it quickly followed with a vision of a slightly larger fawn, almost stag, in a thawed out scene. We should start in the spring, and so we didn't call Springs Church because of that, but we did start in the spring. There's a scripture that talks about in the springtime when the kings go out to war. There's lots of different things, and so we deliberately started church in the springtime. And I get this right. We started on April 19th. 6 weeks in, we've had 6 Sundays of church, and it's been lovely. People have started to come to church in the pub that we started the church in. And our sister-in-law Esther, preached this most simple, beautiful message about love on week 6 of Springs Church. And a guy responded to the gospel that week. And it was the first salvation of this new little church from someone that didn't know Jesus, someone who gave their heart to Jesus. It was amazing. And at the end, everyone had gone home from the pub. Myself, my brother, and our sister-in-law Esther. We were just left kind of in the room on our own that we'd hired. And we were just overwhelmed by the goodness of God and just the kindness of God, as if he's let us lead someone to him. This is like amazing. And we sat with tears in our eyes, genuinely had tears in our eyes, sitting in this function room of a tiny little working class pub in Gornal. And we said to each other, gosh, if it had all just been worth it just for him, it was worth it, wasn't it? That lad came to all of the hard work, all of the worry, all the fear and trepidation. Man, it's just been worth it, hasn't it? And then we looked up, and there's a picture hanging up, a painting. And this painting was of a young stag in a springtime scene. Still got the picture on my phone. A springtime scene, the snow is thawing, and there's green shoots. We'd been there for 6 weeks and we'd never noticed this painting. But it was like what God had shown Linz months and months before. He was kind of like, it's the right time, guys. Wow. And just for the hilarious, just because God loves a bit of detail, the painter is called Christensen.
What was it called?
Christensen, something Johann Christensen or something like that.
Wow.
And turns out it's quite a popular painting. We didn't know that. No. So in terms of the timing and how we got started, it was just, God was just all over it. And we just knew his favour. And it was hard, but there was an energy for it, and there was a fire for it, and there was no going back really. So
Why the name Springs then? If it wasn't because you started with the spring?
There's a scripture in Isaiah that says, see that I do a new thing, now don't you perceive it? I make springs in the desert, and I bring streams in the wasteland. And that was a real key scripture.
One of the treasures that we'd collected along the route was this image of where I saw on 5 ways young people walking down the streets, young people walking into this memorial hall, which we know now it was, with a blonde girl with wavy hair leading the way forward. That similar thing had happened, but with rivers, and there was one of the things that happened when we started church. If anyone knows Gornal very well, but Summer Lane, there's a spring at the top of Summer Lane. We used to live at Summer Lane, and the spring kept bursting, and it kept literally flooding the road. The water would just run and run and run. In
that time that we were meeting and fasting together,
So it just felt that this idea of springs of living water would flood, and
also geographically, Gornal, historically, not so much these days, but certainly in the past, it was known as an area of land where there's lots of natural springs that kind of flow from the higher places in the area and then down. And Summer Lane, where we were living, used to be known to the locals as Spout Lane, because it would, every now and again, this spring would burst at the top and people would quite happily collect spring water and refreshing and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of spiritual connotations, but very practical. This is true of our local geography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm still thinking
It's all a bit
about
wet, really, isn't it?
The painting.
Yeah,
Mad, innit?
right, yeah, the
I didn't
painting.
know that.
Yeah.
The what?
Wow.
I didn't know the
painting.
painting thing, no. That's
That is
amazing.
incredible. Did
Yeah.
you all see it at the same time?
No, me and my brother and Esther. And then we took a photo, sent it to the group, and we were like, guys, you ain't going to believe this.
Oh
6
gosh,
weeks
I
and
absolutely
not noticed
love
it after 6 weeks.
Yeah.
moments like that. It's just that beautiful like kindness of God, isn't it?
Yeah.
That confirmation of like
Yeah.
you're doing right.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Wow.
We could go like day by day into your spring schedule.
We really
We could be here for weeks,
We
weeks
could.
and weeks. But I'm interested, like in those first months, the first year or so, like what are some standout moments that like you can remember God moving like crazy, like that first salvation? What are the other moments that stand out for you in that first season?
Man, that's a
of
tough
Springs?
question. Thinking back to the first year now. Really should have written it down, shouldn't we?
Or any part of the speech.
Yeah, any part of the journey.
Any
yeah,
part.
yeah.
In that first year, I remember a girl called Sam was invited to church with her friends, and Sam was off the Rents Nest estate, and she had a problem with her shoulder, and we prayed for her shoulder, and she was healed in the pub that we were meeting in. So we saw just a really great healing.
Carol in her eyes.
One of our team had a real problem with her eyes, and we prayed, and she was healed with her eyes. Although it was hilarious before we got to that point, that's another story.
Yeah.
And then the first Christmas that we celebrated as a church, we
had
hired
donkeys.
out the pub. We hired these donkeys to do donkey rides to Santa's Grotto. They were the most manged, rabid donkeys. Man, it's just kind of Springs folklore. But what
Ben
was cool?
was Father Christmas.
Ben was Father Christmas. Shh, don't say that. It's real.
Oh, sorry.
And then
You might need to edit that.
and then, but what was awesome about that first Christmas was we had blokes with pints of beer sitting on the front row of our church building, the pub, right, and singing their guts out Christmas carols to Jesus,
Nice.
while kind of like it was like you know that scene in Beauty and the Beast, the Gaston song.
Wow. Spits like Gaston.
Yeah, but it was
Wow.
beautiful. It was raw and it was honest.
Yeah.
And by
There
the
were
time
people
the
like on the
church
floor
service
and all
finished on those Sundays, the Pigeon Fancying Club would come in and have their club, and they started to take offerings because they wanted to help the people in the cathedral, the room that we met in. They started to call the cathedral,
Wow.
and we started to be accepted by the people, and it was beautiful. So in that first year, things grew rapidly.
Yeah. And I think over the years, one of the things that we've noticed along the way, like, again, a bit of Springs language for you, but one of the things we've always talked about are men and women of peace, people that haven't necessarily known God or been Christians, but we've just landed with them in an incredible way.
Their premises for us to use.
Yeah, we seem to have
Much like the people here at the back of the
yeah,
cafe.
like there are moments of where people's generosity that aren't necessarily in the church or part of the
Oh,
church
yeah.
community that
The
just
second week, talking generosity,
open out.
a guy that we'd never met put £1,000 in the offering.
What?
Yeah.
That was mental, wasn't it? Like flipping
Wow.
out. Like there was just loads of like.
Yeah, there's
gosh,
loads of
what's
stories.
going on? This is
Just a random person.
not random. He was known to some people that were starting to come to church. We'd never met him, and he
Yeah.
just decided, just by hearing about what we were doing, that he
Yeah.
wanted to invest in us and in it.
Wow.
So I thought, what the heck?
Wow.
But that happened 2 or 3 times in that first year,
Yeah.
didn't it?
Did it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like the provision of God, just like left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
And I think that's been that story the whole way through. Like God has just turned up, whether that's with people, investing in people,
Yeah.
in finance, in buildings, in
Yeah.
opportunities, in all the way along. It's just kind of like situations have opened up, and there's been moments where God's story has just been very simple to find. And I think one of the incredible things for me when I look back at those days, in those early days, is the journey that we all went on.
Yeah.
So our team went
Very
on an
different
incredible
people.
journey, and we learned so much over that time, and God's grace and God's truth became very real and prevalent in us all, whether that's we had to be kind to one another and generous with our thoughts towards one another, or whether that's we needed to speak some truth and say, this is where we're going, that's okay, that's not. Or there was a real journey, and when I look back now, if I look back at people that first started at church with us, so we spoke about the team that first came, but then all those people then that kind of caught the vision in the early days and started to come, their world looks so different now to what it did back then, and that is the miracle of our family. Like, one of the things we've always spoken about church is that it's a family, it's a community, it's home, and our family has been on a journey together, our church family. So whether that's the highs and lows of life, we've celebrated together, we've cried together, we've been on adventures together, you know, and it's that root of the family is something that God miraculously did. Like, I don't think
and
you
he's
can
still
create.
miraculously doing.
I don't think you can create that. You can't make people who aren't family be family. You can't say, right, your brothers and sisters now, tough. It doesn't work. People opt in and opt out like I did when I was younger. But actually, there was an element of the miracle of God is that we are family, and that still exists today. Even if they've only ever been once, they're still part of family, and that's incredible, really. That's been a miracle. And a hallmark.
God promised us that he would send to us people who would be pillars in the church community, and that has been so true. That has been a prophetic word that keeps paying out, like, all the time. So we have been incredibly blessed with some really wonderful people who already knew Jesus before they came to Springs, but have helped in the work of discipleship and outreach and leadership. And so that continues to happen to this day. So there is such a long list of people I could go, and they're a pillar, and they're a pillar, and they're a pillar. Where would we be without that person and that person and that person? And God's been very, very, very kind.
Wow.
So obviously we've touched on the joys and the highlights. Bit of a trickier question now. What have been some of the challenges?
Someone that I'm not aware that I ever had a panic attack in my life until the night before we held the first Love Gornal prayer meeting.
Wow.
I remember driving home from my dad's house, and just this huge wave of anxious fear came over me. And it was kind of like, if you do this, there's no going back. If you do this, it was only a prayer meeting. I mean, what was going on in my head? I was so anxious that I was physically shaking, and anyone that knows me, that's just not something that happens to me. I was physically shaking to the point that as I pull up outside my house, I crashed the car, don't I?
Oh, wow.
I crashed the car. And I'm like, what is going on? What is going on? For the last 18 months, we've fasted and prayed. We know that we know that we know. And then it comes down to the night before, and like, what is going on? That was weird. And that needed some overcoming that night. And I was very encouraged, particularly by a guy called Phil, who we mentioned earlier, and a guy called John, who we mentioned earlier too. And it was like, it's okay, we got this. And the rest is history. Haven't had anything like that since. It's just that one night before we started the first prayer meeting. You know, it was very strange. Challenges from that moment on. I think things change pretty quickly in the church environment, and so the more the church grows numerically, there's lots and lots of things that you've got to keep being flexible about, and trying to keep thinking forward about, and how do we morph and change, and how do we adapt to accommodate more people, because we don't want to be a big church if it's an unhealthy church.
Sure.
We do want to be a healthy church. What do we do now? And so there's been lots of times where, if we're very honest, it's not much more than making it up as you go along. And so those times can be pretty testing, when you feel like we know what the vision is, we can see almost the end game, but now what do you do? Now what do you do? Like, in this time of growing and working towards everything that God said he's going to do, like, what does A to B look like? A to Z, I've got a bit of an idea what Z looks like, but A to B to C to D, whoa. So that's challenging.
Something that helped with that was Matt Wildsmith, who's one of our core team and one of our trustees.
And also a former Calvaryite.
Also a former Calvary, who's married to Lindsay. I mean, there's all these links. But anyway, he used this kind of idea that church is like a puppy with big paws, that actually, like, we're still quite young, like 8 years in the realm of church, 2000 and whatever. You know, it's still quite young and still quite. I still feel like we're planting most of the time, but we've been there a while now. But we're a puppy with big paws, and so there's always that challenge that any church has is, gosh, we've got a big heart for a big community. Like, we love our area and we want to serve people the best of our ability, whether that's in the house or whether that's in the community that we love. And in order to do that, it requires a lot of resource, whether that's human resource or whether that's financial resource or buildings or practical or whatever that might be. It requires resource. So we're a big puppy with a big heart.
The idea of the puppy with the big paws is a puppy has a big paws because no, it's not that. It's evidence of the big dog that's coming. Yeah. And so it's kind of like a puppy often has big paws because it's going to grow into itself. And so we always feel like we haven't quite grown into ourselves, but we have got big paws. And so on paper, there is a heck of a lot going on in the life of Springs Church, our involvement in the community, but there is always a stretch with that. Right. And so we've got to be really careful about, when it's good to stretch, but when it's just good to just, let things lie. You don't need to push out again yet. Let things grow. Let the shoulders set in. Let the dog grow a little bit before the paws get even bigger. And something that's really interesting is we've been there 8 years now, but the truth is the vast majority of our community still don't know we exist.
Right. Okay.
So if we're going to be honest about it, there's still a lot of people to reach in lots of different ways. Yeah. However, come back to what we said earlier. If it ain't healthy, there's no point. Yeah. And so in all of this stretching, on my heart, my calling is to be a pastor in this church, and so it's my job to look at, are we healthy? Are people rooted in Christ? Because it's all very well and good having volunteers coming out your ear holes, but if they don't know the simple gospel, if they don't know Jesus, if their life is not grafted into the true vine, there is no fruit for anyone else to eat from that's worth eating. And so we've got to make sure that we are rooted people, a healthy people, so that what grows and what comes out of our activity and busyness is actually kingdom of God stuff.
That's good.
That's amazing. And so that is a constant question mark. Okay, Lord. Yeah. And that's on us as individuals. And all of the individuals within our leadership team, are we Christ-centered? Are we practicing the little things? If this church didn't exist, if I never belonged to a church, would I still be following Jesus? Like, is it a job that I do, or is it the person that I am? Like, am I sack off everything that goes with church territory? Do I love Jesus?
So good, Pete.
Because if I don't,
what are we doing?
What are we doing? What are we doing? And so we can look back on our journey as a married couple in the last 8 years, and we could highlight so many flashpoints where tensions have arisen, and it's kind of like maybe divided priorities at times, but actually this together vision that we have, but there's different roles at different times and different pressures at different times. And so the truth of the matter is it's hard work, but when you know that God has anointed it, there is an energy for it to keep going, not to burn yourself out, but when you know that God's on it, there's a rest that laces all the effort. Yeah, sure. If that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah.
So that's amazing.
That's so good, Pete.
There's loads of great things in there, I think, as well. We will bring it to a close in a sec. Last question from me is, I think, really the question I want to ask, you could probably pick out some of the things you just said there in there, they're great bits of advice, but if you could say one thing to somebody who has a kind of this on their heart, or it's maybe they've been getting treasure for years and years and years, and is there one thing you could say as a piece of advice, someone church planting, and they've been listening today and they're going, wow, this is something I can really relate to? What would you say? There's lots of things there you could say. No, we could go just listen for the last 2 minutes. But is there anything you would say? One thing you could say to somebody in that position to end us?
The one thing, well, I mean, it's challenge, like you just say, to say one thing. Yeah. One thing from me, I think, and it's probably because of something that God's personally speaking to me about at the moment, and it really hit home for me yesterday in church. Like I said earlier, Pete could probably share something in a moment, but like I said earlier, for me, I've got a job outside of church. I love my job. I've got a career. It's beautiful. It's incredible. I'm privileged to work where I do, and I love it. But it's busy, right? And needing church alongside that is so busy. And last half term, so just the last half term that's gone, it was really intense for me personally. Really high pressured, really stressful, really overwhelming. And I think one piece of advice that I would say to anyone when you're feeling that pressure of go, or pressure of serve, and pressure of do, pressure of chase after something for God, what I would say is find your rest in Jesus. Because when I shifted my mindset, and to make it applicable to everyone, not just people that are church planted, when I shifted my mindset from I've got to do, chase, finish me, it's all on me, like I've got to achieve and go, and I've got to fit all this in my life, and I need to do the vision that God's put in my heart, and I need to do this, and I need to do that, and the list carries on, my mum, and all overwhelms. Actually, what it came to was, you need to prioritize Jesus. Jesus is the front and center and root of everything. Really, and when I put Jesus back in that place this half term, my life's punctuated by half terms, but this half term, I changed the way I did things. So I wouldn't answer my mobile phone when I'm driving the car because I was listening to something about Jesus. I would devoted my...
She's got hands free. It's not a legal phone call.
Thanks, Ben. But like I would pause my time, because I prioritised Jesus in that moment. And so that's something God really spoke to me about through Lindsay Wildsmith at the weekend. We've mentioned those guys, but they are incredible if you know them. But so for me, whatever you're chasing, whatever you're hunting down, whether it's jobs or planting a church or a family or whatever it is you're longing or is carrying like a burden in your heart for, place Jesus as your rest. Put Jesus as your rest, as your priority, because it's in him everything just finds its completeness. It becomes whole. It becomes well with my soul. So for me, like, not just about planting church, but I guess that's how we could go on the treasure hunt, because we rested in Jesus.
That's amazing.
Beautiful. Thanks, Ray.
Two very short things. One is church planting is a team game.
Absolutely.
A single man or woman or single couple are not as important as they think they are. We've learned that, haven't we? Right. And secondly, love Jesus more than your calling. Love Jesus more than your calling. Your relationship with him will confirm your call. Your call will not confirm your growing relationship with Jesus.
Wow.
And so love Jesus more than what you think you're called to, because he is more important.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing.
What a way to end.
Fantastic. Wow, amazing. Thank you so much, guys, for coming on.
Yeah.
I feel like we could do a part 2 and talk for, for so long. Well, thank you for guys for coming on, being vulnerable and really sharing. We have a tradition that we have on this podcast show, not podcast show, the real life show. Which do you know what I'm about to do? No, you don't. We have a tradition where we take a selfie with our guests, and it's going to happen right now.
And then does it appear at the end of the video?
It does. It's a thumbnail. It's a thumbnail. This time we're going to do a bit different.
Yeah.
We're going to get to watch this absolute manic moment. I'm going to give you the phone for you to take it. You're down the line there.
You can do it, Sarah.
Okay.
So you might want to like just squeeze in.
This isn't my strength.
Your strength. Are you going to sit on the edge of the chair?
I think I'm going to have to. Which button is it? This one?
Just use your thumb on the actual dot.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I can't do it, John.
You can.
Okay, ready? Where are we looking? The green?
The green dot. Oh dear, there we go. Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks guys for coming on.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys for listening. Thank you Backyard for having us.
Thank you,
again.
Backyard.
It's so great to be here and providing all the lovely stuff that you do. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music and Audible. The Real Life Show. It's been great to come in again. We have Episode 3 already in the works.
We've got it ready.
When is
Guest-
it?
We've got it ready.
A
Guest-
We
Whisper.
can't. Mystery.
Guest confirmed.
Are we going to tell people?
Did you get that?
Basketball.
Jackie Baseball.
I got basketball.
Yeah, that's what you get, Jackie Baseball. Jackie Baseball.
You're so close.
You're really close.
I'm
Oh,
really
close.
close.
You are really close. But thank you for listening again. Thank you guys for coming on. We hope you've enjoyed
Thank
it.
you guys.
And we'll see you very, very soon. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.